Fourth, I have a steel brush. 5, I have anti-seize. That's again to make sure that the wheel doesn't get stuck to the vehicle. 6, I have a 17mm socket. This is for my torque wrench and or for the brake bar if I need it. I have a tire pressure gauge here. This will allow us to make sure the tires are properly inflated when we're finished. And I have a socket set, which we may not need, but it's always good to have out as a handy thing to have available. And we have a jack. I have a very nice hydraulic floor jack, which makes things quick and easy, but you could just as easily use the jack that comes with your vehicle. Some new cars are coming without a jack, and they come with a fix-a-flat kit instead, so make sure that you actually do have a jack if you intend just to use the one in your car. And finally, you actually need the winter tires themselves. You'll need winter tires on rims. If you have just the tires, unfortunately, you probably won't be able to do this yourself unless you have some very specialized equipment. And then we need the black cap removal tool. I don't know if that's the technical term, but with Volkswagens, they have these little black caps over all of the lug bolts. And you need to get that. It's stored in it where the spare tire is. Very important that you put it back afterwards, because otherwise you will be in trouble if you need to remove them again. Before we jack up the vehicle, we need to make sure that it's not going to roll away. This means that you either need to put something under the wheels, or in this case, I'm just going to put on the e-brake and put the car in first gear since it's a standard. If you have an automatic, leaving it in park is fine, but you should put the e-brake on as well. Next, locate a safe jack point for the vehicle. The majority of cars and SUVs today are unibody, and so they have specific jack points. If you have a pickup truck or an older SUV, you might just be able to use the frame, and then you can do it almost anywhere. But on this car, you'll see there's this little indent on the right here, and on the left is kind of where the frame ends, so it's pretty obvious that this is a reinforced point. If you're unsure at all, make sure you check in the manual. This is not something you want to mess up. You can cause serious damage to your vehicle if you jack it up in the wrong place, and they will have the locations clearly marked in the owner's manual. One additional thing you'll want to do before you jack up the car is to begin to loosen the lug nut bolts just a little bit. If you jack the car up all the way, it can just be more tricky to do while it's up in the air, so it's always nice just to loosen them up first. Once you've jacked up the car and you've got the wheel off the ground, you can loosen the bolts all of the way. Most of the North American or Japanese cars will have lug nuts that you can remove, leaving the wheel kind of sitting there on the studs sticking out. But since this is a Volkswagen, it has the opposite. It has lug bolts. I actually prefer the lug nuts. I find it a little easier to put the wheel back on and to take it off, but it's fine once you get used to it. Because it uses bolts, you always need to be ready for the wheel to drop off once you've removed the last bolt. In my case here, you can see that I have the opposite problem. The wheel is really stuck on or seized on. A trick I learned a few years ago when I was trying to remove a stubborn tire off my truck was to lay on your back and kick the tire side to side, left side then the right side. It's a really effective way to get it off. I probably didn't need it in this case, but it was a trick that a roadside assistance fellow showed me, and I hadn't seen it mentioned anywhere else, and it works very effectively. While you've got everything off here, it's a very good idea to inspect the brakes and just make sure everything looks okay. I just to make sure really that there's nothing obviously wrong or broken just while you're down there. Next, we want to take the winter tire or the winter wheel and flip it over so that we're looking at the back side of it, and we're going to apply some anti-seize to the wheel. And before you do that, if it's really, really rusty, you could use your steel brush to take off any of the rust just to knock it down a little bit or to clean it up if it's particularly dirty. In this case, I don't need to worry about that. It's pretty clean. So just take your anti-seize and apply it in all of the areas where the wheel will touch the vehicle or the hub. And this will stop the wheel from sticking to the vehicle, as you saw when I was removing the original wheel. Next, we want to take the wheel, lift it up and position it in place before carefully threading in the first bolt. Note that there are several holes here and not all of them are threaded, at least on the Volkswagen. Once you have the second bolt threaded in, you can let go and then put in the other 3. Take your wrench and tighten down the bolts until they're just snug. You don't want to overdo it at this point. We're really just tightening up so that the wheel isn't going to fall off and so that it's firmly in place. While you're doing this, it is important to tighten the wheels in a star pattern or a crisscross pattern. So you start with one and then you tighten the bolt directly across from it, and then you tighten the one that's approximately across from that, and you do that until you're completed. It just helps the wheel seat nicely on the hub. Gently lower the vehicle using the jack. If you have a hydraulic jack like this, you're just going to turn the handle to the left very, very slowly until it starts to release and gently lowers the vehicle to the ground. And that wheel is nearly complete. We do need to torque it still, but for now I'm going to do the other 3 wheels, and I'm not going to walk through step by step on those because the process is exactly the same, but you can watch me at a very high speed, and then we'll move on to the final step, which is torquing everything up. As I was doing this, the very last wheel had a particularly low tire pressure, so you can see here I'm just inflating it with a little pump I have at home before we put it on, and I'll drive it to the air inflator at the gas station later to bring it all the way back to where it needs to be. It was about 20 psi, and it's supposed to be at 36, as we can see here from looking at the door panel. A common mistake people make is looking at the max PSI on the side of the tire and inflating their tires until they reach that level. What you really want to do is inflate it to only to the point where it reaches the amount that's on the sticker on the door. On this Jetta, that's 36 PSI. Next, take your torque wrench and set it to 90 foot-pounds if you have a Volkswagen Jetta like I do. If not, then check your owner's manual and make sure you're setting it to the exact right amount. There can be a lot of variation here, and some vehicles can be as high as 150 foot-pounds or even higher, so make sure you get this right. This is not a case of the tighter the better. If you go too tight, you can really damage the threads. At this point, I find these little plastic caps are very handy to reinstall as I torque the wheels so that I know which ones I've done. I'll take them and put them on after I tighten each bolt. Normally, you'll want to check the air in the tires right away, and that's why I had the tire pressure gauge. But because I actually had the pump out, I went ahead and inflated all of them a little bit, and I'm going to take the car right now to the tire shop to inflate them all properly to the level that's on the sticker. Over the winter or over the summer, the tires can lose a little bit of the air that's in them, just from like very slow leaks or just as it naturally changes with the air temperature. So it's always something to check right after you reinstall them. Most tire shops will ask you to come back after 40 to 50 kilometers to have the wheels retorqued. This is a good idea to do yourself too, so after just a few days of driving, or depending on if you have a slightly higher than average day of driving, then definitely torque the wheels again after about 40 to 50 kilometers. That's about 25 miles. And that's it. It's a pretty easy job that you can do in your driveway in less than an hour and save yourself some money and time going to the garage. If you enjoyed this or found it useful, please, please, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. It would mean a lot.